everybody. It is great to be talking with you. I hope wherever you are, the weather is better than it is here in Boston. We just got major snowstorm and it's freezing out there. What are we doing here? We ask ourselves that at work all the time. What we're doing here is our mission. And the mission of WorldBoston is to foster engagement in international affairs and cooperation with peoples of all nations. So that's a lot. So we also have a slogan, which is down here in green, that makes it sort of easier to remember what we do. The world in Boston and Boston in the world. And that really describes our work because we have two pieces to our work. The world in Boston, which involves hosting visitors. And so the world coming into town, and Boston in the world, which involves programming for our community here on topics of international importance. We also are affiliated with some important organizations. We are an independent corporation, nonprofit, nonpartisan, independent. However, we are a member of something called the World Affairs Councils of America, which is the oldest grassroots foreign policy organization in the US. It has about 90 different local councils around the US, from, the enormous World Affairs Council of San Francisco, which has 60 people working there, to, a little group of 6 volunteers in Montana. So we belong to the World Affairs Councils of America, which roughly corresponds to our Boston in the World work, or what we call global engagement. And then we also belong to something called Global Ties US, which unites all the organizations that participate in certain so-called citizen diplomacy programs. So that corresponds to the world in Boston. Okay, so citizen diplomacy, again, the world in Boston. Citizen diplomacy is a really important concept. It's person-to-person contact versus, diplomacy that we think of, an ambassador meets with a minister of foreign affairs. Citizen diplomacy is what ordinary people do. And it's actually very important, not only to the national interest, but also to human beings. I'm sure many of you have been on exchanges or have hosted people on exchanges or know people who've been on exchanges. You were, guess what, citizen diplomats, whether part of an official program or not. Our international exchanges, not all, but most of them are funded by the State Department. That is, we fulfill contracts for them. And of course, they reflect certain US foreign policy goals. That's okay, that's their privilege. They are the client, we're providing a service to them, but we also do some independent programs. Some people confuse us with the State Department. It's not true, we're independent, but we do have a special status that allows us to host these programs. What we don't do at WorldBoston, unfortunately, maybe someday, is we don't send groups out. We're really just receiving groups. The top themes don't really change very much from year to year. Obviously, public health is very important during the virus, and they'll change slightly from administration to administration. So I started in 2014. I have seen some change. The main themes are pretty much the same. Our biggest origin for visitors is Europe, not surprisingly, because we're sitting right there on the Atlantic in Boston. The last few years before the pandemic, we were hosting about 90 programs a year, covering a total of about 800 people. We're the 4th biggest in the US doing this. So IVLP is the International Visitors Leadership Program. It is the flagship citizen diplomacy program of the State Department. You also may have heard the term soft power. It's a soft power program. Custom visitor programs we can put together for you. Let's say, there's some NGO in Brazil that wants to put together a visit to Boston and wants programming in, I don't know, youth development or coastal sustainability, like green fishing practices. We know everybody. We can program everything. We can also handle logistics and hotel. An important part of citizen diplomacy is obviously meeting as many local people as you can. Our visitors all stay in hotels. We don't do homestays. We find that in the busy urban lifestyle, they don't work very well. Home hospitality doesn't mean staying with your host. It means having a meal. So we have wonderful volunteers who will invite a group over or half a group, and just have some downtime with the visitors. Professional resources refers to the professionals that we have found to meet with our groups. It really is supposed to be a peer exchange. Let's go back to the example of youth development. A group of women from Saudi Arabia who were looking at girls' sports in Boston and Boston area. So they were all professional physical education specialists, whether coaches or scientists, et cetera. And so we found professional resources, people who were expert in physical education for women in Boston for them to meet with. So that's what that means. Global engagement, Boston and the world. These are programs that we do for the community. We have a couple of regular programs, Great Decisions, that's a monthly lecture. Chat and Chowder is a monthly book talk. In other times, Chat and Chowder actually literally includes chowder. It's not just a lecture, but you may have heard of, clam chowder or New England chowder. It's very hearty, hot soup. So we'll have that and some beer and wine and small tables. Then things pop up, special opportunities. Somebody is visiting town 3 years now. That does concern diplomacy very closely is the State of the State Department. This is a program that I started with Ambassador Nick Burns at the Future of Diplomacy project at the Kennedy School. And it's so interesting. This is worth it to them at the Kennedy School because we are not academics at WorldBoston. We are all kinds of different people. We're not inside a university. And so that's very valuable to academics and also to people in the State Department or who have recently been in the State Department. That has become really a big annual program for us. We have an annual youth program called Academic World Quest. Here are the winners from 2 years ago. And then of course, networking, so important in any endeavor. We really try to do different kinds of networking events. So we do have some pretty high level speakers. This is the past year or so, but I want to emphasize that it's not just about the famous. It's not just about the ambassadors, because sometimes international relations has this image of being kind of glamorous. We also work really hard to bring in people that no one has ever heard of, but who have interesting perspectives. Ambassador Thomas Greenfield has just, like in the past 2 weeks, been nominated by President-elect Biden to be ambassador to the UN. And of course, Ambassador Susan Rice was ambassador to the UN under Obama. She was his national security advisor, and now she's been nominated to director of domestic policy under President-elect Biden. So it's fun when, your speakers are famous like that. How do we make this all work? We are, as I said, an independent nonprofit. I am always fundraising. I'm always getting sponsorships. One of our popular programs every year is the Consul's Reception. It's kind of like our big annual fundraising event. And we wanted at the same time, not just to do a fundraiser, but to really focus people's minds on the notion that we have to continue with international engagement, just the way that you're doing in your program right now. It's very easy at this time of domestic crisis. I understand both Brazil and the United States are having really enormous challenges. Very easy to withdraw and only think about our situation, our presidential election, our economy, but you know what, the world continues. This has really been our mantra throughout 2020. The mission persists. We have to figure out a way to keep doing these things with economic challenges or virtual programming challenges. None of us had done that before. And so we had a special series that we just finished off, 3 different events, and we called them The Mission Persists. So 3 quite high level events. And instead of a single fun reception, we had 3 special Zoom events. That's really the name of the game. Programs change, the mission persists, and that is how it is in any nonprofit if you're going to last. It's not about, oh, our program's this, our program's that. Ultimately, in a nonprofit, what we're trying to do is serve a mission. So our programs have to adapt according to the environment in order to keep moving toward that target, moving toward that mission. On the citizen diplomacy side, how do you do that if people aren't visiting you? Well, we've just gotten really creative. We're working with many of our partners who our groups frequently visit, such as Harvard or the Boston Police Department, believe it or not, is an incredible partner of ours. They have been really open to meeting virtually. And fortunately, I'm happy to say that our State Department wants to continue this work even virtually. We just created this webinar series, International Exchange in a Time of Isolation, and we were literally looking for people who had visited us before. For example, we had one with 5 journalists from literally all over Africa talking about the COVID situation today in their homes. We also did a few on culinary diplomacy. We had a doctor in Madrid who made one of her favorite dishes just in her kitchen. We didn't get paid for that, but we kept the mission going and developed some important skills in virtual programming, which we will be using, I think through 2021. I can talk about my bio a little bit now if you want, or
yeah, that would be great to get a sense for what your trajectory is, both prior to arriving at WorldBoston, and then what is a bit of day-to-day responsibility for running a team and keeping things moving forward, okay, especially in challenging times.
I am big on visuals. So this is the WorldBoston website, and that is me. I've been at WorldBoston for about 6.5 years now. And my background is really a mix of for-profit and corporate. Initially started out as a specialist in Russian studies. And after college, went back to Russia, or it was then actually the Soviet Union. I was there during the collapse of communism, working in the field of civil society. I was started a nonprofit there and ran it. When I came back to the US, I thought it was important to get some more education, build some more practical tools. So I went to Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies, which some people call SICE, for a master's. And then I did my MBA at Columbia Business School. So from there, I went into the corporate world. I worked back in Russia for UBS, doing institutional equity sales. Some people are born to play the violin. Some people are born to do finance. I was not born to do finance. When the ruble collapsed, I managed to actually, that was in 97, I stayed and I worked, this is like my second MBA. I worked for a small business called the Center for Business Skills Development, running a team. The ruble had been devalued. All kinds of people were out of work. They were very brave. They brought me on. And I learned so much from my boss about how you downsize, but you don't, there's an expression in American, you don't eat your seed corn. So a farmer keeps enough corn, enough seeds to plant when the rain comes, right? When life gets better. So don't eat your seed corn. He did everything and taught me so much about keeping the core of the business viable. When the market came back, which it always does, we were so far ahead of our competition because we managed to keep most of our team together, even though people were on short hours. We kept up our contacts with all of our clients, just, socially checking in from time to time. And, we took off and doubled sales in that first year after the financial crisis. So I learned a lot from that. Then I came back to the US, my hometown of Boston, and it was clear to me at that point that what I really love is running nonprofit organizations. And indeed, the whole time that I was in Moscow working in the corporate world, I had stayed active in nonprofits as a board member. So back here in Boston, I ran a large youth program that focused on sports, on sailing as a life skill for disadvantaged youth. My thing as a nonprofit manager is that I can fit into pretty much any environment. Some people get into nonprofit work because they have expertise for example, in conservation and environment, or they have expertise in youth education. My expertise is really in nonprofit management. So from there, I was getting more and more interested in issues of equity and social justice. I had become involved with a social justice organization, Boston Center for Community and Justice. I was on their board. Looked like they were about to go out of business. They asked me to come on as an interim executive director, which is a very interesting job to have. It's sad in some ways because, you know, you're seeing them through a shutdown. But as a manager, it's a very tricky, very, very interesting time. And again, about keeping the mission alive, my job, I saw, was to keep the programs and find a way to convey them to another organization that could continue the programs. I felt very happy with what we did. We did a program merger with the YWCA, which is a very big organization here in the US. And those programs still exist. People are still using them, really through networking. I found out about this opening at WorldBoston, and it's the job of my dreams. I get to do all the things that I like to do at once. I love management, I love international relations, and I love the city of Boston.
So I'll give a quick thumbnail of the Global Student Ambassadors. Then it would be great for Professor Carolini to briefly introduce herself. She heads up international relations at Yntema, so she can speak a little bit more about that. And then really it would be nice to have an interactive conversation. We can continue to pepper you with questions or have discussion, but it would also be nice to pull in some of the students. I'm incredibly impressed through the work with the student ambassadors with how good the English is, particularly of people who have not had the opportunity to go abroad. Let me turn it to you, Carolina. Please, it would be great for you to introduce yourself and share with Mary a little bit about international relations at Yntema.
Mary, it's a pleasure to meet you. I think I have a really important job here in this meeting, is that show to our students that sometimes we just don't have that good English, but we should just try. I was just thinking that to be a citizen diplomacy and to think about international relations and be I could say that be an important person to the world, right? To try some connections, to show our culture and show also Brazil to the world. We have just to focus on communicate.
You are distinguished citizen diplomats clearly already because the Olympics has to be one of the biggest forms of citizen diplomacy that anybody can think of.
We also have to think in all the regions of Brazil, right? Everyone could have, any one of us can be ambassador. I'm graduating international relations, and I think a lot of our students here are also graduating international relations. I have a master's in political science, and I have PhD in political science. Nowadays, we have 2,500 students at international relation course. I'm the coordinator of the major. We do have in the distance learning in our major in specific, we have once in a week online meeting where we can teach, and the students, they can write to us in the chat. When I started here in Inter, I started in the face-to-face. I become a coordinator of the course in 2016. There's two moments of my career that are really important. The first one's that I lived abroad when I was younger, much younger. I did my high school abroad. I was in Finland and was there where I learned English. I was a really good friend with one American girl. She was from South Carolina.
So for those of you who don't know the Boston area, we have, it seems like we have every 10 feet, you find another university. There are so many. The big ones, obviously, many people know their names, Tufts, Harvard, MIT, whatever, but we also have Wentworth Institute of Technology. We have Simmons, which is a pioneer in women's education. I mean, just so many. So we really benefit from that. Very often students want to come to our events because it's relevant to their studies, and also for networking, because maybe you'll meet somebody who's interested in the same topics as you, or maybe you're looking for a job. Our visitors are always going in and out of universities to, have meetings with different specialists. What we do is, as I said, it's different from just, journalism or something. We're not the BBC. We're not the New York Times. It's really about engagement, about the conversations. For some people, well, for most of the people, it's during their free time. So we've been thinking very carefully about what it is that we offer that's beyond content. It's not exactly entertainment. It's not exactly journalism, but it's connections. So we're going to continue in 2021 to think about ways that we can really connect people meaningfully beyond just a lecture and goodbye. We've done trivia contests. We have done actually very successfully. We've done some big happy hours on Zoom. Takes a lot of programming. You can't just like put people on Zoom and assume it will go well. You have to have activities. You have to have a lot of coordination to put people into breakout rooms and take them back out. But we really have to do this. Ultimately, it's because we think that this kind of civic engagement is critical to democracy. We have to see each other. We have to spend time with each other. And again, we can't afford to just get lost in our own country's issues and points of view. It is really tough here, as I know it is in Brazil. I think we're the two countries that are suffering the most. I grew up in this city and I see entire blocks where the stores are all blocked, are all boarded up. As I said, it's important that we remain engaged, continue to use our critical thinking. So we have a really strong sense of mission. So far, I mean, just in terms of management, in terms of fundraising, we have certainly lost some of our sponsors, not surprisingly. I mean, things are tough. We used to get sponsorship from local hotels where our visitors stay. Their occupancy rate year on year has dropped by more than 90%. Overall, sponsorship is, it's okay. And we're very fortunate. The State Department, which is a big client for us, they have decided to continue to do this kind of programming, although it's virtual. Here's a story that if you look at American politics, if it's something that interests you, this might be surprising. What we hear about all the time, and it's true mostly, is that the Democrats and the Republicans hate each other. They refuse to cooperate. Our Congress is frozen in this conflict. However, programs like this, citizen diplomacy, like the Fulbright program, a few others, every year get bipartisan support. Bipartisan meaning that both Democrats and Republicans support them. I think that's really encouraging because underneath all of the insane political disagreements, somebody still believes that it's really important for us, for Americans, to be engaged with the world. It's important for people to come and visit us. And as I always say, you may like us, you may hate us, but at least you'll know us. If any of you are studying business, they're always telling you like, oh, you need a strategic plan and what's your 3-year plan and all of these great things. If anybody tells you right now in December 2020 that they have a good 3-year plan, I think they're lying. From a business point of view, I'm just watching cash carefully and trying to look forward, about 6 months.
Hello, my name is Annalicia. I work with distance education. I work for the government here in Brazil.
Oh, okay.
I work at the Federal Institute, and we have students from middle school through graduate and everything.
Oh, wow.
So my question is, my brother had participated of a program like WorldBoston in Ireland.
Oh, interesting.
I guess they have the same work you do in United States, they do in Ireland. Do you have any contact with other organizations that does the same thing in other countries? I think it should be great to have this communication with another institutes?
That is a really interesting question. We don't. If we do, it's informal. Of course, other countries are going to do this. I mean, for example, I was on a delegation to Israel, very similar. You know, they wanted us to get to know the country, to have meetings with people, to go to the museums, that kind of thing. So of course, different countries do this, but we don't, that I know of. I don't know of any network of these programs. It's a really interesting idea.
There's a big network in the US that you work with across different cities, right?
That's correct. Yep, very much. In networks, you know, it's this word that everybody uses all the time. It's kind of boring, but and maybe you're seeing this, all of you in your studies and in your work, but boy, during a crisis, it's wonderful. You know, I can call my friend who has the same job that I have in Denver, Colorado, and say, oh my God, what are you doing about this problem? You know, and we all talk to each other on the phone. It's wonderful.
Mary, thank you
There.
for sparing our time to us. I really appreciate it. My name is Josiane. I am pursuing my degree in international relations. I am
Great.
17 years old. And as part of the young generation, I'm kind of passionate about politics awareness. And so my question is, how do you think as a young generation we should do to engage in international affairs? I really would like to attract countries' attention to invest in science and humanities here in Brazil. We are a rich country, so I think we could be better in the international world.
You must be a very smart woman to be in this program at 17. My God. I mean, I think, you know, academic preparation is the first step. And certainly foreign languages are essential. You know, you have to follow the news. I mean, you have to. I don't know what journalism is like in Brazil, but like I have to read the New York Times every day. You know, that's like just to do my job. I need to do that, and our local paper. I think it's sometimes happens when we're students that we get so involved in our studies and you know, school networks, et cetera. But you really need to be informed about what's going on, about bigger topics. For international affairs, that's particularly important. You can't be a master of everything, but probably what will happen is that there will be a region particularly fascinates you. So, you know, follow that. So my advice for people who are getting going in careers obviously is, you know, to be well informed, to you know, develop your intellectual skills, et cetera. But as soon as you can, find a way to be useful. A great interview in my perspective, say you have a meeting with somebody, it's not even for a job necessarily, but just have a meeting. If they say, oh, you know, I've always been interested in Japanese cooking, and you see an article about Japanese cooking, send it to them. Say, this made me think of you. Here's this thing. And so, you know, you're paying attention to what's going on in the room, and you're making yourself useful. As for Brazil's role in the world, I don't know. I might be thinking about studying Chinese. In my day, it made a lot of sense to study Russian because I graduated from college at the end of the Cold War in 1987. So that was a really hot topic, you know, U.S.-Russian relations. If I were graduating from college now, I think I probably would have studied Chinese. Of course, English is always handy. I mean, English always,
Yes,
you know, is handy anywhere
like
in the world.
the main topic.
Understand what might be helpful to other people. It's a very basic message, but I'm sure that Mary has received emails just requesting things. So you have to be
That's right.
careful about just always asking. So everybody needs help, everybody needs advice, and hopefully people are well intentioned and want to provide that. If that happens constantly in one direction, your chances of having somebody respond on the other side or be excited go down dramatically. And when you're at the beginning, it's really up to you to build the goodwill, to build the trust, and to show that you're excited and interested.
Can you make a comment about that, Jason?
Yes.
So farther into your career, and I know that many of you are already working, and I really admire the people who can work and study at the same time. I did a lot of work in sales in the corporate world, a lot of work in sales. I ran a sales department, et cetera. And the classic frustration of a salesperson, or the classic mistake, is you know everything about your product. This is the most incredible coffee cup. I have a PhD in coffee cups. It's amazing. Let me tell you about the colors and handle and everything. And you forget to find out what the customer actually wants. This notion of listening to what the other person is interested in, boy, we can use it in all of our lives.
Thank you so much. So the last question will be for Poliana. I want to be cognizant of the time, and also just to thank you up front, because I'd rather have a student end with the question. Thank you so much, Mary and Carolini, for making the time. I know how busy everybody is, and thank you for the students for being with us. Poliana, the last question is yours.
My question is very quick. It's just like if you're planning on continuing the virtual meetings and events after the pandemic, because I'm very interested. I was looking at the website.
I'm honored that you spent time to look at our website and think about our work. That is the perfect example of what we were just talking about. Find out what the other party is doing. You know, the whole virtual programming world is new to all of us. And, you know, just as far as public health goes, obviously our work is going to stay virtual for a while. But we are thinking that even, you know, in 2022, 2023, there is a real role for virtual programming. I have people now attending our lectures from San Francisco, or from, you know, Tel Aviv, or similarly, I recommend to my audience in Boston lectures that, you know, are happening in other places. So we will continue with that. And all of you can participate, by the way, in our lectures. I mean, they're open if you just go to our website, as Poliana just did. As for our programming for January and beyond, our next lectures will probably go up by Monday. It's great English language study, by the way. If you know, look at our YouTubes, etc. So thank you. That's a wonderful, wonderful question. I appreciate it.